Good morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock. We're going to have, and we've got a full day scheduled. Before we start, there's a few housekeeping things. Water is outside, so stay hydrated. If you're a speaker, get some water before you come up and talk. There's coffee outside. It's going to be there until it's gone. They're going to do coffee again they said from 8:30, okay, so it'll be there till 10. Then they'll have coffee in the afternoon. Lunch is from 12 to 1, and it'll be box lunches. They'll probably be lined up out here, and we'll come back into the room. So the password for the conference, if you didn't get it already, is DrupalATL, all lowercase. So when you try to get onto Wi-Fi, which may be overwhelmed by now, who knows? So anyway, thank you for joining us at the Government Summit at DrupalCon. There's an agenda that I think was sent around or it's posted online, although who knows? It's like things have been a little squirrely this year. The staff, the event staff said they were going to bring some power strips in. So there'll be a few power strips. So if you need to recharge computer or devices at some point, you may have to take turns or something, but we'll have that taken care of. So let's get started. My name's Kevin Lanahan. I'm with Drupal for Gov, which is a nonprofit that kind of helps promote the use of Drupal in government. We have also on the team Kirsten Burgard, hi, everyone. Tom Fleming, and Jennifer Montgomery. There we go. And there may be a couple other folks joining us throughout the day, or maybe not. Who can tell? It's kind of loose. So let's see. When you came in, you were handed a card for Drupal GovCon, little blue card. This is Drupal for Gov's annual event. Takes place in the DC area. It's going to be at the University of Maryland this year in August 13th. August 13th. Completely free.
As always.
Yes, as always. There's trainings, there's sessions, and it is focused a little more directly on government. So the other thing that wanted you to know, we'll do a little icebreaker later, but for those of you that are new to Gov Summit or new to DrupalCon, today is a great opportunity to meet your new best friends for the next 3 or 4 days. So, just get to talk and get to know each other. It's how I met people and got involved, and really makes you part of the community. So, let's see. We're ahead of schedule already. This is great. Okay, so we have, well, actually, no, we're going to do a little bit of introduction. You've met some of the team. And what we want to do is just go around the room very quickly, who you are and what agency you work for, whether state, local, contractor, whatever. But just so we can place geography, roles, and names to your faces. So if we can start with you, because you're right up front.
Mike Cernak, I'm the webmaster for the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, Cleveland, Ohio. Half of a two-man team that handles the entire web presence for the authority.
Okay, let's start here.
I'm Sarah Saraswati. I'm from Santa Clara Valley Water District. I'm a web developer.
Okay.
We manage external facing websites, internal with all of Drupal.
And what state?
California.
California? Okay. Yeah, we should probably include that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I'm Sarah, and in the same company, Santa Clara Valley Water District in California.
Okay.
Hi, Ron Rainey, from Douglas County, Kansas. I'm the webmaster, web developer.
Tiffany Ferris, I'm an account here or contractor.
Rebecca Chumley, Yax, Virginia.
Okay.
Mitch Tyler,
Jersey courts. I think we just mixed you guys up.
Yeah.
Jim Norris, Penn State University, I'm the senior director for web strategy there.
Jenna Fry, I'm with Lullabot.
Alex Isser, CPA developer out of Warsaw, Poland.
Oh, excellent. Welcome.
Warren Wesley, I'm working with Revo Solutions in the DC area on the regulatory.
I think you're on my shirt.
Yeah.
Rebecca Lunker, State of North Carolina, Digital Services.
Amy Hepler, State of North Carolina.
Okay. You were here last year, right?
I feel like I met you
Yeah.
at Asheville camp.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and this table, we'll start with you.
Fran Wiley, I'm with Northern Ontario, Canada.
I'm Dave Cameron I work remote in Ithaca, New York for ICF Next Government as a content strategy. And I'm Dan Arquette, I'm a contractor for Mabomo and work a lot with GSA.
Stephen Musgrave, also work from Mabomo in Northern Virginia. Currently working for SEC in Pennsylvania.
Mike Gifford with Civic Actions, but I'm based in Ottawa, Canada. I'm also a Drupal core accessibility maintainer and with WC3 embedded expert.
Shan Duran, a typical savant, Asheville, North Carolina.
Monique Paul, Information Management Services, government contractor from Maryland.
Government contractor in Maryland, front-end developer.
Okay, so,
We also did not introduce.
well, we did
Maybe we just
briefly,
said our name.
but okay, so
I'm gonna go first.
we'll let you
I'm
go first.
Kirsten Young, and I'm with the Department of Labor. Yes, I'm a Fed. That's right. You'll notice that I'm like the only one here, maybe one other person. So be nice to us. It's been a rough couple weeks. Oh, I'm also in Maryland. So yay. And then Jennifer?
Jennifer Montgomery, Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs, and manage the agency websites.
Tom Fleming, I work in an agency called Last Call Media, do work for Mass.gov in Massachusetts.
Okay, we got two new people coming in.
Lots of
There's
seats
room
over
up
here.
front. And I'm Kevin Lanahan. I spent 20 years with the Missouri Department of Conservation, which is Missouri's Fish and Wildlife Agency. We were a Drupal shop. I retired last year. I still keep showing up. I don't know why. It's like, either a bad penny and they can't get rid of me. Can't
We
tell.
also had one more team member, Christine Stevenson, who is working for USDA, who volunteered and worked on this project with us, who can't be here because of funding. So, but I wanted to make sure we all said
Yes,
hi
thank you.
randomly, Christine.
Yeah. Okay, so the next thing, again, since these are your new best friends for the next 3 or 4 days, is just a little icebreaker, and it's very low stress, very low, not a whole lot of sharing. It's called Have You Ever? And basically just stand up if you've done any of these things that we talk about. And
Sit down in between, right?
huh? Well, let me see. Is that part of our rules here?
I feels like it should be,
Well, if you want, well, if you do, yeah, that'll be aerobic, won't it?
right?
Okay, yeah, so feel free to sit down afterwards. So, stand up if this is your first DrupalCon. Whoa! Welcome, everyone. It'll be an exciting few days. There's a whole lot going on. Stand up if you've ever been to Drupal GovCon. Yay! Thank you for your support. Okay, stand up if you've ever stayed up all night binge watching a series. Yay! Stand up if you've ever tried a food you can't pronounce. Yeah. Yay, adventurous eaters. Yay. Stand up if you've ever missed a flight. Not a flight of beer. Yeah. Thank you. Stand up if you have ever danced in the rain. Yeah, there we go. Stand up if you've ever accidentally sent a message to the wrong person. Okay. The rest of you are liars. Stand up if you've ever sung karaoke in public. Oh, there we go. Extroverts. Situational extroverts.
And there's usually a Drupal karaoke, so keep that in mind.
Yeah. It may come up later. Stand up if you've ever forgotten someone's name right after you met them. Yay! It's like introverts of the world unite, but separately in your own rooms. Stand up if you've ever taken a selfie with a famous landmark. Oh, yeah. Good. Stand up if you've ever told a joke that nobody laughed at.
If you have to explain it, it's not a joke.
And then stand up if you've ever worn pajamas all day long. There we go. Work from home, yeah! Okay. Stand up if you've ever tried to learn a dance from TikTok. Here we go.
Oh, wow. I thought that would be a lot more people.
Yeah. Let's see. Stand up if you've ever been on stage for a performance or presentation. Yeah, there we go. Thank you for sharing. And stand up if you've ever accidentally walked into the wrong meeting room. And the very last one, stand up if you've ever taken a nap and woke up not knowing what day it was.
That's some deep sleep, people.
That's
Or jet lag.
okay. So let's see. Do we have anyone from the Drupal Association here? Oh, good. Come on in. Hi. And you're Nick?
Yes.
Okay.
I am him.
Nick is going to talk for a minute about Ripple makers.
Yep.
So we've got slides if I can figure out how to pull them up. Let's see.
I learned that TikTok dances, they actually aren't dances, they just change the camera angle so it looks like you're doing something. So if you can't do it, you're not missing much.
Let's do that. Come on. Okay. And we'll put that back on slideshow. And you can run or I can run it, whatever, just click and you're good.
Alrighty. So my name is Nick Colger. I'm the product marketing manager at the Drupal Association. I was recently hired in August. This is my first DrupalCon. Thank you. I know it's a big deal. I probably shouldn't tell people it's my first one because I'm expecting like 50 people to jump out of the closet and be like, we got you. And so I'm here to talk about our Ripple Makers program. So the Ripple Makers are a group of passionate individuals supporting the DA's mission of driving innovation and adoption of Drupal as a digital public good. This work empowers the DA to continue its vital work in advancing a common goal of making Drupal better and making it supported for years to come. Here are a few of the things that the Ripple Makers program supports, all things that we believe are necessities. Things like engineering. You can't do much if the servers don't work. And so the engineering, right, things to highlight, server availability, security, this is all supported by people's financial donations through the Ripple Makers program, as well as advocacy. This is really important to us. Drupal as a digital public good registry. We were recently featured in a yearly report from the Digital Public Good highlighting Drupal. And so financial commitments will help support that work, as well as the Cyber Resiliency Act. This is legislation that is potentially restricting open source in Europe. And so we want to improve that advocacy and make sure that obviously does not happen. And then last but not least, DrupalCon, right? The Ripple Makers program can support things like scholarships, our roundtable, and networking. Specifically, I like to highlight the scholarships because they make events like this more accessible for people who can't commit the money. And so, last but not least, I have a video to show.
Yeah, I don't have.
Ah. Okay. Well, it was a fancy video.
You're gonna have to do the dance, Nick.
You said, so do the camera. So it was just an ambassador video highlighting the impact that the Ripple Makers program is making on our community. And again, with financial support, we can continue. Oh, sorry. With financial support, we can continue doing the great work that we're already doing. And so here's a QR code that you can scan to learn more. To learn more about Ripple Makers, what we're doing, what are the opportunities, so that we can continue doing our great work that we're already doing. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a great day. I'll be around. I'm also taking photos. So if you want a nice, high-quality photo, maybe you need a new LinkedIn photo, new Slack photo, let me know. I can hook you out. Thank y'all.
Okay, now we're going to get into the meat of our day, and we're going to start with a keynote panel on accessibility. I know states have kind of a deadline to get everything ready to go, and so we have folks here to talk about, led by Mike Gifford.
So, goes up?
Yeah, everybody, whoever, come on up.
Want to give people a minute to get more coffee when you set up?
Okay, don't take too long, because there's a lot to cover, and there's other things on the agenda, and we could talk all day on this, but we'll try not to. So we have to turn on the mics.
So grab coffee if you need it. If you don't have a seat, there's plenty over here.
And they're not scary people, so.
Just loud.
Okay, so there's a couple more quick questions while people are coming back for coffee. How many people here are familiar with accessibility and what accessibility means, like the basics of accessibility? So most people, that makes sense because you're involved with government. And I want this to be an interactive session, and ultimately, if I have a whole bunch of questions, and I could talk about this for the rest of the day, but ultimately, it's about getting answers for you, what you want. So if you've got questions, I want to know what they are, so that we can go off and take this panel and try and provide as good answers as we can to what your needs are, because this is. There's a lot of there's new legislation from last year that the Department of Justice is putting in, which is requiring states to go off into states, municipalities, and I think educational institutions as well, to get to WCAG 2.1 compliance, as opposed to either Section 508 old school or Section 508 refresh, which is the WCAG 2.0 standard. So there's new requirements for accessibility. And I think that a lot of people are still unfamiliar with what WCAG is and what those requirements are and how those standards are changing and what those are set up to be. So that's the first part, is just trying to be thinking about your questions and what we can do to try and send you back to whatever agency you work with more confidence about accessibility and more answers in that space. So I thought we'd start with a brief introduction for the.
Well, actually, before that, I have a follow-up question. How many of you guys, even if you're familiar with it, how many of you guys are responsible for accessibility where you are?
Nice.
Okay, so about the same.
And how many people here think they have enough staff to actually handle the accessibility requirements that you have? Okay.
Sounds about right.
Excellent. Okay, it's one possible person.
One half hand.
Excellent. So yeah, I'll just start. I'll say Mike Gifford with a Drupal core accessibility maintainer. We definitely want to have people involved in Drupal. and Drupal's accessibility. It's a huge thing, so please consider going and being involved in Drupal's accessibility in the issue queue and in the community. And if you're not already part of the Drupal Slack, there's an accessibility channel there that you can join where you can get more information and learn more about Drupal accessibility by joining the community Slack. Fran?
Awesome, thanks Mike. So yeah, hi everyone, I am Fran Wiley. I am with a Drupal agency called Northern, just outside of Toronto, Canada. So super excited to be here chatting with you all today. Mike so graciously invited me to this panel today because I am our accessibility specialist at Northern. I am certified with the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, that one's always a mouthful, as a web accessibility specialist. So I really handle a lot of our accessibility practices, rolling out new criteria when they come from the WCAG, and work with a lot of our government clients to ensure that they're meeting the latest and greatest requirements.
And hello, I'm Dan. I work for a company called Mobomo, and companies like to brand stuff all the time. So our kind of like word that we use for stuff is human-centered design, and what it really means is that we start most of our projects user experience first. So and that includes an awful lot of accessibility that we try and bake into everything from the start. So.
Yep. All right, and I am Jasmine Epps. I'm the director and product owner for GovHub. GovHub is the state of Georgia's web publishing platform solution for state agencies. We host about 87 state agencies with about 90 websites on GovHub. So, our role at the Georgia Technology Authority is to set forth standards and guidelines for accessibility for our state agencies to follow. Using GovHub will allow them to take the guesswork out of that because we take care of all of that from the code to our content model, and just help them focus on publishing content and not have to worry about the accessibility behind it. So, yeah.
And it is frankly a model that every state in the U.S. and every province and country in the world should be looking at, because it's a really excellent model for collaborative development and for making sure there's a good standards compliant, usable, accessible interface for every agency, as opposed to every agency willy-nilly picking their own webmaster and doing their own thing. So yeah, definitely big thumbs up to this particular approach. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
So first question I have is, there's a move right now to shift from talking about accessibility to Section 508 compliance. Has anyone here heard of that transition? And that sort of especially coming from the federal government at the moment. And I just wanted to see if we just have a little conversation about what is missed by that moving from accessibility to 508 compliance. And so if does anyone have any thought?
I mean, when I look at that and when I look at that question, what I think is missing is, if you're just focusing on being compliant, you're just trying to get through a checklist to make sure that you meet the requirements and then you walk away. You don't treat it as a scalable approach to building your products or your services, or baking accessibility into your procurement and your hiring. It's sort of just like an approach of making sure that I don't get sued with the compliance part. But you miss out on putting accessibility first when you're only thinking about the compliance, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I kind of think the same exact thing, that there's when you start thinking about accessibility as the target goal, then you lose a lot of creativity, because that becomes something you got to get out of the way until you can move on to the more interesting work of doing stuff. And the best user interfaces come from people who start with accessibility as like the base, and it says, and use it to help think about like what they want to get accomplished, and like from using that as a starting point, you can allow creativity instead of constraining it.
Fran,
I think you guys nailed that.
Just one quick thing I just wanted to add is that WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is what Section 508 is based on at the moment, it's also something that doesn't cover all disabilities. It covers, it's more biased towards people who are blind, people who have hearing disabilities, mobility disabilities, but it doesn't particularly cover things like cognitive disabilities. So if you're dyslexic or you have dyscalculia, if you're dealing with second language issues, like those are not barriers that are covered by WCAG. And so trying to even issues of aging are things that are not particularly addressed all that well within those guidelines. They're useful, but it's not like this is something that is sufficient on their own. And remember, we do want questions from the audience as well. So Key, is that a question over there? No.
Just a wave.
It's too. Dan, go ahead.
So you know, there's like starting from nothing where you're making a new thing, and that seems pretty easy. But sometimes you know, we're making you know, we're doing continuous development, putting out a new feature, and it screws up the accessibility, right?
Yeah.
But the developer doesn't even necessarily know that they're screwing it up, because they're just like, I'm doing my thing here, I'm developing this thing.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on how to reel that in, or?
Dan, I think Dan might be a good person to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is automation. I mean, like we try and build in accessibility testing for whatever level people need across the board. Like, most people aren't interested in the AAA, but we also always include that, whether they're going to pay attention to it or not, just to kind of like raise awareness about what's going on, because there's an aspect to it where you're training the developers, and if you push the accessibility you know, analysis to the level where people are actually doing the work, then they're going to learn some stuff. And if you push the accessibility analysis after the fact, after they're done, after they've shut down the ticket, after they're finished their work and have mentally moved on, then, you know, it's going to come back to them and say, oh, you got to fix this bug, and then they'll fix the bug maybe, and but they won't be thinking about it, right? So the real answer is, it's hard to get everybody informed about what's going on. So you know, the automation, having it into the build process, attaching it to GitHub, tends to work pretty well. You know, when it comes to keeping people learning.
And I think that's the area where making accessibility from the start, you're starting from a platform of what is it we want to achieve, not how do we want to achieve it. So you have that opportunity to then say, all right, here's our goal, how do we get there in a manner that is in fact accessible?
Now, there's people have used things like design systems and also CI/CD as ways of supporting that. Fran, do you want to talk a bit about that side of like what has been done with with Northern in terms of your supporting clients?
Totally. So just some context for you guys as well. In my current role at Northern, I do manage a team of developers, and so with that comes, you know, training new developers on accessibility. So it really is just about starting as early as you can. Baking it into like basically all the latest IDEs have accessibility plugins, a lot of really good ones from Axe that I would definitely recommend, to give developers the prompts like as they're writing the code. You know, start from the very first second, and then as Mike just mentioned in the CI, again, you can loop in Axe there, and that will flag all the errors. So really making sure that all the issues that might come up are flagged before it even gets sent to the QA team. And then also training the QA team how to check it. So that way a ticket never gets closed without multiple people reviewing accessibility on it. Sorry, yeah?
I'm going to go ahead and put out the elephant in the room.
Please.
Which is also when you have a diverse development staff, when you have people who are innately familiar with accessibility issues because they themselves encounter them, you have better outcomes.
This is true.
Are you telling us that the best development team isn't just a bunch of 25-year-old guys?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, just checking.
I'll be that guy.
I'll add in a little bit of kind of advice, hope here that no one will ever take. You know, documentation, design documentations, user documentations. When somebody knows something to capture that and put it in a README and say, hey, here are the rules, and then being able to go back and reference that when something comes up. But
Read instructions?
well, that's the thing. I know no one will ever do that, but that, trying to bring that awareness across the team to other people is pretty essential.
So Jasmine, as the govy on the table, you've done actually some interesting work trying to go off and provide organization-wide or government-wide scanning and assessments to make sure that your sites are meeting those compliance requirements. Can you describe a little bit about what it is that you've done? And I know that you're working with Site Improve.
Yeah, so all of our sites on GovHub have Site Improve running on them. So there's constant auditing from an automation level, but there's also education to our agencies about what to look for when they're manually auditing as well. Site Improve is really cool in that it not only tells you what the problem is, but what disability it's affecting and how to go about fixing it. So, sometimes they'll encounter problems on the back end that say that needs a developer, and then that's when we step in. But a lot of the times it's their content and the things that they can control. So Site Improve allows them to do that. We also have kind of gamified our accessibility auditing for the agencies by posting their Site Improve scores or their gap scores on analytics.georgia.gov, so it's public. Everybody can go to it and see where they rank amongst the other state agencies, and it keeps them on their toes, I won't lie. So we get tons of tickets about, how can I fix this thing so I can get 10 points or whatever. Like, it's very important to a lot of the agencies for them to showcase their accessibility compliance and that they're doing the right thing. And that really help them understand that it's just the right thing to do, right? Not about whether or not you're helping people just with disabilities, but like you mentioned, like there are groups, we're all gonna need accessible content one day, as we age, or if you encounter situational disabilities or temporary disabilities, you're gonna need to depend on the government services to be accessible. So that's just, the Site Improve and the gap scores have definitely encouraged the agencies to put accessibility first, especially when they're creating their content.
And that level of transparency, I think, is just so critical, and something that we should definitely see all of our governments be striving for, that level of transparency, because it's a wonderful model. Related to that, I was involved in creating the Web Almanac this past year, so the 2024 Web Almanac and the accessibility chapter. And if anyone's interested in how their state compares to neighboring states, I have stats on that, because I could collect all that information and be able to have a government-to-government or department comparison based on the analytics that is collected by the HTTP archive. So it's a really, like, this is something that is publicly available if you know where to look, and something that can be used to politically cause change and motivate people, because it is a leaderboard makes a big difference for so many people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's, how many people here have third-party tools on their websites, like some feedback form or something? Okay, and how many people here have noticed accessibility problems tied to those third-party JavaScript tools that are added in? Okay, excellent. And is the client usually, if you're a contractor, is the client usually like, oh yeah, we'll put the responsibility on the guy who has a third-party tool? No, that doesn't. Go ahead, Dave.
Are you talking about overlays?
Not specifically overlays, but also overlays. Like, but because there are other third-party tools that people throw in.
I want your candid thoughts on overlays.
I got them. So. but let's go. Fran, Dan, do you have thoughts on overlays? Jasmine?
Yeah. One thing that's big in the government space are the chatbots that overlay on top of the content and kind of float around and don't really pass accessibility compliance as much. So those have been the challenge that we've seen on sites. And we see the why agencies are drawn to chatbots, like they're trying to solve a constituent's problem, like without them having to click through the site or figure out where to go.
Yeah.
But that is not necessarily the best solution. And you have to. I think what you're trying to get to, being solution based. What are you trying to achieve? What are you really trying to fix? And a lot of times they just think a chatbot is going to solve all of their problems.
Right.
When sometimes it's a workflow issue. Sometimes it's a understanding of what services you offer and how to go about receiving them issue, and not necessarily like you're getting too many calls because people are confused. I think they're going to be just as confused when they're interacting with the chatbot. So,
Right.
so
Especially if the chatbot provides them BS answers.
yes,
So-
exactly. It's not that useful of a chatbot, right? So that's been one thing we're trying to find the best solution, so agencies can come to us for those chatbot solutions rather than going out in the wild and finding some that aren't accessible.
And I think overlays in general kind of reflect this like mental model problem people have. For the CSS people, you know, there's important, and you know you're not supposed to use that, but you're always tempted to use that because it's so easy and it's right there and it does the stuff. And I think it's that same mental model where people want to put an overlay on top of stuff. Well, this is the most important thing on the page, and then we're going to put another most important thing over top of it, and then another most important thing, and it's really a failure of understanding like what is actually important and what isn't, because not everything can be important. And I think that's why right now the chatbots are overlays, because they're extra, because they think of the website as the thing, and now you want to add this little bit into it. And I think ultimately in the future we're going to have a better model of like what the user experience needs to be when people are doing like natural language communication. So like NLIs, natural language interfaces, and it's going to be its own thing hopefully, and not a attached on third party thing.
Go ahead, Dave.
I just wanted to clarify, when I said overlay, I was thinking specifically of, here's your accessibility solution with a little bug that has a wheelchair user icon in the lower corner and it floats around, and that's going to make things accessible on my website. There, I purchased this and installed it, and I'm accessible now.
Yeah, boo.
Fran, did you want to? I will speak to this, but
to the generic overlay.
Yeah,
Yes, the first question. One other big one that I see a lot of people. That's problematic on a lot of sites is the cookie consent bars or pop-ups, or they're on all our sites, but if not done well, major blocker. I can't tell you the number of websites I've come across that if I'm just using my keyboard, I can't even get past that, and then your website's unusable. So something like that, even though it is mandatory, still needs to be thought about and built in an accessible way.
Yeah. I was going to say in terms of overlays that they're. I mean, how many people here have, like, if you're working with government, how many people is privacy and security important to? Probably most government agencies have that as a fairly high list, and providing a third-party tool that takes all the interactions from your user, bundles that up, and then processes it with some AI, possibly in some other country, to go off and to regenerate the HTML on the page in order to claim to make it accessible. I mean, there's a huge security and privacy vulnerability just in that process, and it also slows down the website, and also for a lot of people, those people with disabilities are actually find that a lot of people, those widgets actually make the website less accessible because they're providing fixes that are automated in a way that degrades that whatever kind of accessibility is native to the page itself. There's a bunch of different types of them, and there's a part of the Web Almanac that talks about overlays and different ways, and the personalization aspects are really quite good. Like most of those overlays have great ways to personalize it, whether it's making the fonts bigger or trying to look at changing the kind of font or changing the color contrast. Like there's some great tools that are in that, but that's different from the automated remediation work that is being sold to people, because it's really not where it should be done. It's a really problematic way to address those issues. And so many of those overlays also break the automated testing tools that a lot of people use. So it's a problematic situation where you can't reliably test the site you're developing, because this overlay does stuff to it from JavaScript. Yeah.
I tell clients it's accessibility theater.
Yeah.
Because it's something performing accessibility for people who don't need it.
Yeah.
Because it looks good to the
And the website itself, like they're like, oh, well, look, the people who are paying for $50 a month or whatever, they claim it's going to be accessible and it meets all the requirements, right? So if they claim this, how do I argue between experts? Because they've got experts and people who validate or are vouching for it. So how do I manage that? So.
But that's where I got them to change their mind, because I pointed to that dollar amount that they're spending for something that's actually making their website worse, and they can save money
by
getting rid of it and building accessible better.
Yeah. Now, sorry, you had a question as well.
Well, not concerning overlays, but like iframes, migrating older site content into Drupal and trying to fix iframe issues or
Any thoughts on iframes?
They're terrible.
Yeah, always going to be problematic.
Yeah, it's really hard to control the content in iframe, obviously. So and to make them accessible and respond to smaller screen sizes and things. And so we just honestly discourage the use of iframes if we can. But we always encourage, if you must iframe in some information, try to make it as accessible as possible. You know, with the color contrast and you know, being able to, you know, respond to different screen sizes if possible. But yeah, they're just a pain. There's kind of like no way around them. And any time we can have an agency create content like that is, you know, in their website and in their content model and their structured content, we encourage that over the iframes. So
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues with iframes from my perspective is like, with accessibility, I think one of the biggest things is providing context and consistency. And with an iframe, we can provide the top level context of labeling it, but once you're in the iframe, like since you don't have that control, it's really hard to create that consistent experience for the user and provide all the context that they might need.
Yeah, I don't think there's a solution to that exactly. We've had some luck. The best case we had was getting one side, you know, getting the content of the iframe to accept some sort of theming parameters, so that you would be able to pass in what your kind of site needs, some styling, some stuff like that. But really, they will never integrate well, and just to dissuade people from using them and to convince them that the content belongs. If it's in their website, it belongs in Drupal.
Now, you could potentially extract that information using XPath or other mechanisms to be able to embed that tool inside your site. Like there are ways or if there are RSS or XML feeds of that data you're working with, then you could pull in and have a local representation of that data. But that often requires more skills and more trust that the other agency isn't going to break their site by
maintenance. The maintenance burden on that is insane. Like you have to make sure that if you're allowing the agencies to do it too, if you're allowing just, you know, content editors across all your agencies to have that control, then it's almost impossible to make sure that they don't break. So.
Yeah. So how many people here have used the US Web Design System, the USWDS? All right. It might be in some problems these days, but it's definitely a challenge. But I want to talk a little bit about design systems, and I know that you know, Georgia has Orchard as your.
I was definitely going to plug it before the end of this if I had.
Good. So why don't you talk about that, and then we can the rest we can sort of talk about design systems as well, particularly how they integrate with Drupal.
Yeah. So when we embarked on a theme redesign recently, a couple of years ago, and we took that opportunity to really create our design system. So it was always something we wanted to do, but our implementation initially didn't work for the audience that we were going for. We were trying to have it as a source or a resource for our agency partners to brand their internal applications to create the same experience as their GovHub website. But then we found, like, we were using Pattern Lab, which was integrated in Drupal, and it just wasn't user friendly. Like they wanted simple things like their hex values for their palette, their color palette. They couldn't copy and paste the hex code out of Pattern Lab. Just really simple stuff like that. So when we did our redesign of our theme, and we got new color palettes and things like that, and new just a new design, a new UI, we were like, okay, let's look at a different approach to our design system, and then we chose Storybook, another open source product. A lot of integrations happening with single directory components and Storybook to be able to easily maintain a design system and have a single source of truth for the colors and the fonts and the typography and things like that. So so we have orchard.georgia.gov. It is the state of Georgia's design system.
And it's peachy.
It's very, it's very peachy. You know, we're trying to keep with that the theme of outdoors, I guess. Because the first thing we had was called Forest, and this new theme we have is called Bloom on our websites, and so Orchard is the design system. It's great. Yeah.
Dan, any thoughts on design systems? And
well, they're great. They're the you know what I was talking before about sharing documentation and doing stuff. Well, if you use the USWDS, you're taking people's thoughts and documentation that they've carefully put together, and you can use that right away. So that's a great resource, just in general for you know getting that baseline up and wanting that stuff. And I think having a community like this and being able to contribute back to it and influence it and kind of collectively drive you know, this stuff is kind of where we definitely, you know, need to be, and people should be, you know, making use of that. Now, the only problem with design systems in general is that is Drupal. Drupal doesn't eat design systems naturally, so there's definitely an integration layer, and we've spent a lot of effort forcing Stephen Musgrave to, you know, generate integration modules with Drupal and USWDS, for instance, and it's not an impossible task, but it does require some amount of effort to try and, you know, like talk about single directory components and everything like that to make these things easier, to make it mesh with the thought process that you have as a Drupal front end template themer, and also be able to be a USWDS, you know, thinker and expert. They don't naturally go together all the time.
Okay, so I want people to not be shy. How many people here have regular conversations about single directory components? Okay, so there's a few, but the majority of people do not. And it might be useful to just have a bit of an explanation about what single directory components is and how that helps to go off into to mesh with your design system and control content that's being generated by your front end devs. So does anyone want to give a go on an explanation of single directory components?
Give you a 2-second explanation.
Yeah.
Just all the code you needed in one directory for a component. End goal is really just to make reusable components that you can plug and play with.
So just harder to screw up things.
Yeah.
So you're not expecting to hand code and copy the HTML from you know, every single time you're creating a unique component on your website.
And it's a thing. I mean, there's React. There's like the industry in general for front end stuff has kind of been, you know, this is an old thought, and it's finally making it, and it's very useful, and it's making it kind of into Drupal, and it also allows you to wrest control of stuff. You know, if you have an idea that you need to express, and you are reliant on getting your nerd on the phone to be able to do it, you know, it's better for you to be able to focus on just that one little piece and just do that one little piece. You can have a thought by itself without having to understand the context of the entire design of the system and the entire thought process and the entire way CSS is being aggregated and all sorts of stuff. I think it's a very helpful mental model that's gonna that you know we need.
And it is part of Drupal 10, but definitely not part of Drupal 7. So hopefully nobody here is trying to do any of this stuff in Drupal 7. Because that's end of life. You should be off of it by now. Next question. How many people here have issues with accessibility issues produced by like content that's created by the authors? Okay, a few people, yeah. So what I'd like you just to have some conversations about what are we doing to help authors produce accessible content. So this is the ATAG Authoring Tool Accessibility Guidelines Part B. So how do we try and make sure that we're supporting authors in creating accessible content? And I think that Greg will be touching about this briefly in Dunlap. He's doing a talk on he's written a book on authoring tools and supporting authoring tools. So that's going to be coming up in the this week as well. But anyone want to touch on authoring tools and supporting authors?
Yeah, I'll take first stab at it. I think the biggest thing is really just training. A lot of content editors that we've interacted with might not necessarily have heard of accessibility, know why they should care about it, what it is. And so I really like to leverage just, setting up an official training setting, get on a call and start with the basics and build that empathy for why they should care about accessibility, because it is so easy. We do have tools that, we can plug in, send the alerts that this is broken in accessibility, but if they don't know why they should fix it, a lot of people are not going to care or will just easily ignore it. So I think just getting face-to-face and doing that initial training, building the foundational knowledge of the how and the why, and then really diving into plug-in tools in the WYSIWYG and things like that to do the practical training.
Stephen?
Yeah.
One module that's helped us with this has been editorially.
Editorially, a classic.
Absolutely.
I think we use that one on every single one of our websites.
It's a great tool to sort of make sure. It's like spell check for people who are content authors. Nobody's going to be writing a document without spell check, but it's something that if you can provide those accessibility errors early on in the editing process, it'll address that. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, Site Improve helps our agencies.
Yeah. And do you have the module that's plugged in so that authors have that enabled or not?
We used to, but you have to have a login,
right.
and it's hard to manage each individual's instance when they're looking at CK Editor and having to put the login credentials for Site Improve and all that. So we did use that for a while, but Site Improve has a free browser extension that we promote. That for people to use, but they have access to their Site Improve instance where they log in through Site Improve and they can see their site and they can see all of the issues with their content that they are able to fix. So Site Improve is definitely a big help for our agencies to like I said, put that content or that accessibility first approach to building their content. They're very conscious of the readability, and a lot of times with government content, you have to make it have a lot of jargon in it. There's no way around it, and so that can affect the readability and make it a little hard to understand. But as much as they can, they do make the effort to look at those readability scores and their SEO scores and things like that when they're creating their content.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna start an argument. I'm gonna say you foolishly try and train people.
You gotta try. Gotta say I tried.
I think we found out that there's, in my mental model, there's it's a binary thing. Either somebody gets and is interested in accessibility stuff, and even if you don't give them those tools, they'll find an overlay on themselves to check it, and they'll grok it right away. And then there are people who. The goal is not to provide them more tools, but to take away their power, to use Drupal to break up content into different fields and restrict those fields heavily so that they are ultimately put back together. But really, it's there seems to be some people that you don't want to give control over. But yes, for the people that can be trained, for the people that do have an interest in it, providing that feedback, but like you're saying, it needs to be immediate. It needs to be, editorial in the WYSIWYG. It needs to be, they need to be able to see it right away. So they need to have a preview that's legit and live and can give them that feedback so they can teach themselves.
And I'll have your back on training a little bit. And maybe not so much training, but mindset forming. We host twice a year Gov Talks, a conference that we put on, and a lot of them have been accessibility focused, where we each person on our team pulls accessibility into whatever part of the team that we affect. So our content specialists, you know, they talk about the workshops that they offer, where we'll come in and we'll help you with, you know, building some content models and things like that for accessibility. You know, from the GovHub standpoint, what does the roadmap look like for the things that we're doing to help accessibility on the GovHub platform, and just, you know, just our messaging as a whole. Like, this is one of our pillars of creating content for our constituents. This is something you need to be thinking about all the time. And so yeah, like I'll back up training a little bit. Yeah.
And I think that that not everyone is trainable, but if you start off with it as you're orienting new staff and bring accessibility as part of that, there's a really simple course that we encourage everyone to take at Civic Actions, which is the WC3. They have a little free certification that you can take a course that's through edX or something like that, and it's a nice course to explain the why accessibility matters, not the how, but like just to make sure that people understand that this is one of the values of the organization. And so there's lots of tools like that, even if you don't have a budget, you can access. Dave?
I was just going to say, I agree with the idea that training can be something that is not feel like training, like I'm in a class and I have to get certification because I watched this many videos, but it's like a culture. And when you onboard people into a project, whether they're content people or developers, I think that's your opportunity to do that kind of shift left thing that you were talking about before, of start the conversation that, why do we have a website? Are we building this for humans? Well, then let's understand humans need a wide variety of needs, and just make that part of how you talk about what you're building and why you're building it from the beginning. And if you, when I worked in higher ed, before we let people have the keys to create content, we would have that conversation that, okay, this is a responsibility you have, and if you want to contribute, you have to understand that we want you to get your message out there, but understand that this means that we're going to meet this certain level of standard, and here's how you do that. And if you have questions at any time, here's a thing within the CMS you can do to reach us, or here's how you email us or call us. Just make it very easy to reduce barriers to doing it well.
And it's that the whole Peter Parker line, with great power comes great responsibility.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. People here, does everyone here have access to an accessibility subject matter expert on their team? Few people. Okay, that's good. But also in terms of your team, like there's a few people here who are sole web developers. Like they're the only web person on their team that they're responsible for this. Is that right? We've got a few people who are the sole. Yeah, okay. But a lot of people you'll have a team of either like front end people. You've got designers, you've got content strategists, you've got a range of people that are involved. And I just wanted to sort of say, especially for people who don't have an accessibility subject matter expert, or people who have lost their accessibility subject matter expert, like what is the role of the teams of people that are involved in creating digital content? So, Dan, you want to start talking about sort of looking at the role of teams to address digital accessibility and
I mean the best, when you have, I guess we work on a bunch of larger projects, so we have a wide team, and we can segment out the user experience people from the accessibility people and then everyone has their own specialty and things kind of like roll between them, and that's best. But that's not always the case. But I would say like the roles are still there, even if you're wearing 12 hats on the thing, and spending some time putting on one hat and forgetting the rest, and actually thinking about accessibility, learning about accessibility. I would, I know this has kind of gone off topic, but like I would encourage the thought process of accessibility not being this restrictive thing that you have to learn about and study about and do it about, but it really is this like, this minimum standard. And if you can think about this minimum standard, it's going to help you be creative and help you think about your users and help you think about user experience. And if your thought process gets you to all the same places that the WCAG standards are getting to, then you're doing a good job, because they should be like obviously deduced by what you're trying to do with your users. You know, why did you even have this thing? These things are obvious. Is like kind of where you want to get to, if that makes sense. But.
I mean, I'll say like with many problems these days, accessibility just seems so big, and trying to address it in your organization just seems like such a daunting task. And so I would say like for anybody on those teams who don't have like an accessibility czar or a person, to just champion it in a way that you can contribute, in the way that your skills, you know, offer your ability to address accessibility. So for instance, like if you're the training person on your team, like just making sure that training is accessible. If you are the technical architect on the team, you know, I harp on when we're creating tickets for the backlog, like somebody off of the street should be able to come up and read this ticket and know exactly what to do and what it means for this ticket to be complete. And having accessibility baked into the acceptance criteria of your tickets is something that the developers can do. Like they don't have to be like accessibility experts, but just examining what it is that they're addressing in the code and where is the opportunity to implement accessibility or make sure that what they're offering as a solution is accessible. So I think that everyone can contribute to accessibility on their team and not be an expert, but just like you said, like having that as your mindset and going into everything that you're doing in your organization.
Cool. Yeah, I really like what you said about like not everyone has to be an expert. Like the biggest thing with accessibility and getting started with accessibility is really just starting, taking the first step. I know that is an invisible door, I like to say, that a lot of people have. They're like, oh, it's a lot, like it's really intimidating to start, but you just have to. I know a lot of accessibility issues that come up are a lot of the low-hanging fruit, and so it's easy to get caught up in the weeds of like the interactive elements and the iframes of it all. But even just starting with the basics is a wonderful place to start.
But what's that phrase? Every journey starts with a single step.
Yeah.
And so like that approach. As one of the things I've done with the WC3 recently is publish the draft accessible roles and responsibilities mapping, and that sort of ties all the success criteria to specific roles, so that it's possible to go off and say these are the people who should be looking at in a typical project accessibility. And so it's like, how do you get that sense of let's try and define quality and make sure that everyone, whatever their role is able to use accessibility as a way to go off and make sure that they understand how to do their job better, so they can be a better developer, a better designer, a better content author. Like, how can we use that as a metric to understand quality and build that into our work? Yeah. Yes?
So I just want to ask, how do you approach PDFs? So, I mean, you could take it from the top. What level? I mean, it's easy to say, let's put a title field. Let's choose the language, choose doc title, auto tagging, and keep it very high level for that portion of it. But then once you start getting into those forms, and sometimes the headings as well can be very complicated. Can you do just high level and just say these are the items you need to check off this box?
I'm somebody that's of the Nancy Reagan school of PDFs, which is just say no. So that's my approach, but that's not a very popular approach, and even there's places where there's feedback and pushback on that. But I do want to go off and get to our panels. But before that, Kevin, go ahead.
Work for Missouri Department of Conservation, Fish and Wildlife, and tons of PDFs. We have publication, we have forms. The forms were all online, but there's some folks who just they want to print something, so we did that, and so we remediated the hell out of those things. There's services that can help with that, but what we ended
Sorry, did you say snot otter? Did you say?
It's
Okay,
eastern hellbender. It's a salamander about 2 feet long that lives in Ozark streams.
Okay, I just wanted to check you did say snot otter. So of the panelists, Fran, you want to start on PDFs?
Yeah, PDFs. Where to start? Yeah, we've been doing a big push to recommend just converting PDFs to web pages is the best solution, but obviously that is not always achievable, especially with, you know, sites that have thousands of them. Do you work with Adobe? Like, is that how you're remediating them? Yeah, like, I think just going through the checkers there and starting at the high level with the low-hanging fruit, but, like, at the end of the day, I don't think PDFs are ever gonna be perfect. That's my mentality that I use to push for moving to the actual web pages. So, yes, everything is good, but, like, the more is better. In general with accessibility, you know, like there's never an end point, I think, with accessibility. You should always be pushing to do the best that you can, do more. Yeah, I don't have any other thoughts.
Really, I think part of the key with that too might be as new PDFs are created or existing PDFs are updated, that's your opportunity to implement some of the standards, some of the changes. You can't necessarily change history, but you can certainly stop the hole from being dug deeper as time goes on.
And I want to just really quick, raise your hand if you know so much about this topic, you're going to give a presentation on it.
I think
That's great.
I think I'm gonna attend that. Yeah, if I could invent something to solve that problem, I'd be rich. That is the like #1 question that I've gotten since talking about accessibility since 2017. Like, PDFs are just not accessible, and we just encourage them to make them into content, and structured content.
Way at the back. Yeah. Just before we jump into that, there's a tool, an open source tool that the little country of Luxembourg created called Simple Alley PDF Scanner. That's a great way to go off and to scan your website for a particular domain. It looks for all of the PDFs, it downloads them, and then you can run a script to go off and evaluate the PDFs, and it'll give you a spreadsheet that you can then import to say which are the PDFs that have the biggest errors. So it's a great tool, and of course it's open source and free. Thank you, Luxembourg. So the next, so in terms of captions, how many people here love captions?
Captions or captions?
She said
captions.
Captions, yes. Captions, no.
Captions, yes.
Captions.
Captions. Yeah, they're not the best. They're you know, hard to use sometimes, and will create the cognitive barrier for people to create or to submit a form or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, having some other sort of spam anti-bot or something running on the back of the form rather than.
Does GovHub use captchas?
We used to, but not anymore.
Good.
Yeah, for that. So now we just have anti-bot running on web forms.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, we generally try and avoid that and try and convince people. I mean, what we've sat down and showed them that, you know, we can just ask OpenAI to solve it, and it will. And then even though most of the standards haven't quite gotten up there, I forget if it's 2.1 or 2.2, but the you know, the cognitive load thing, like asking some people to be able to do those type of things just to access your data is you know, fundamentally something that you know, we're trying to dissuade the community from doing. But you know, putting, you know, using honeypots, using other techniques to kind of like avoid the spam. But you know, right when, you know, AI became popular, I would say across the board, especially for anonymous, you know, public forums that we have, was just a massive uptick in all sorts of stuff. You know, you want to buy gold, you want to buy silver, you want to buy jewelry. It's like ridiculous stuff.
And we found they were kind of buggy too. Like if you have some other extension running in your browser, or you have JavaScript turned off for some reason, or just it introduced all kinds of scenarios that we really couldn't test for. So we'd get a bunch of tickets about the reCAPTCHA's not working, it's not loading, I can't submit or something, and so we just found a different way.
So the quick answer to your security team is get with the times. There are other solutions, and CAPTCHAs are no longer a best practice. Dave?
I'll just say for the forms, if you're not familiar with Code for America, the past couple of years they've done something called Form Fest, which is fantastic. A lot of people in government, from federal agencies to city groups, the past couple of years are both available on YouTube if you search Form Fest. And there are some examples, I think, from this past one, specifically where they were showing how CAPTCHAs can be broken with AI very easily. There's a lot of libraries out there that just will get you right past them. And that might also address some of the PDF stuff, but yes, I'm also talking about PDFs tomorrow at 3 o'clock. But for digital free, I'll be talking for an hour about that.
Mike, can
Yep.
you repeat the name of the app from Luxembourg?
It's not an app. It's an open source script on GitHub. It's the Simple Alley PDF scanner, and it's done by the Luxembourg government. And if you're the other thing, like there's the Drupal accessibility Slack. So if you're on, again, do join that. But there's also an Alley Slackers chat that Slack channel you can join that's focused entirely on accessibility, and there's actually a Drupal section for that. But there's a lot of the people. There's a lot of government people that are involved in that as well. There's also has anyone here heard of Apolitical? So Apolitical is an organization that was based in the UK. They're now in the US as well, but they're trying to go off and it's a government-focused space to have communications with, basically want to try and have government-to-government communications, and there's an accessibility channel on that as well. And I'm helping to lead the accessibility channel within Apolitical's space. So there's other places to get answers and feedback on accessibility. Yeah. Did you find the site?
I just took notes.
Okay, excellent. We're here at an open source conference, and I just wanted to know, do people have just sort of thoughts on the role of open source and accessibility? So, Fran, you want to go ahead?
I think they go hand in hand. Like, just the community mentality, because a lot of accessibility, comes from empowering people. And I think Drupal falls in line with that as well. We are people built and people run. And so just like the power of community, learning from each other, really, like I can speak for myself, that is how I learned accessibility and how I continue to learn accessibility from people like Mike. And I don't know where I was going with that thought.
Well,
Jasmine, jump in here. Save me
Well,
again.
same. Drupal definitely introduced me to accessibility. You get accessibility out of the box in many ways with Drupal. The default theme, Olivero, is accessible. The default admin theme on the back end, Claro, is accessible. And so you again take the guesswork out of having to create an accessible experience. And then also, when we talked about earlier, the transparency of having open source code that you get with using Drupal, and you allowing that transparency with your constituents about what's running this website that we're asking them to put their information in. So yeah, I think those couple of things, like you said, it's just it's community backed, and the community is very accessibility focused. So you get those benefits from using Drupal.
Dan?
Yeah, so I'll give a little contrarian example to kind of contrast it with the community here. So if you were trying to get some sort of Rust thing added to the Linux kernel, it might be shameful not to know a fact about how assembly works in a certain CPU architecture. And the exact total opposite is true here. It is not shameful to have questions or want to reach out or want to know more or want to learn more or want to discuss things about accessibility and this stuff. The open source community and the Drupal community is a sponge for this information. Everybody is in it selfishly to get that information, and everyone is adding to it, and everyone's testing things, and everyone's putting thoughts into it, and it just couldn't it's hard to imagine some sort of like privatized scenario of accessibility. It really isn't. So going hand in hand is an understatement.
Totally.
So I started working with Drupal core largely because I suggested to Angie Byron that there was a bug that I found in accessibility and that she should fix it. And she said, no, this is open source. You should open that bug and fix it. And it started a process of me going off and finding more bugs and submitting more tickets and then fixing the bugs. And it's like, oh wow, I've just moved 2 to 3% of the web to be more accessible because I've found some issues I was able to address. And it's a really empowering thing, especially when you're so much of accessibility comes down to like a whack-a-mole kind of feel, that you're just like running into the same kind of problems over and over and over again, and you never get to the end. But if you're able to actually fix a problem upstream, then you can actually make a really significant difference to the lives of millions of people, quite literally, given the number of people that are using Drupal. So there's that.
And to your point, for governments, we run into a lot of the same issues. So having that open source code to go to for not having to reinvent the wheel and, having those common problems addressed because there's a community who is constantly contributing back to the community that is, invaluable.
Absolutely.
I think it's safe to say that accessibility is inefficient if profit is your only measure of efficiency. If your measure of efficiency is effectiveness, then accessibility takes on a whole new meaning at that point.
Right.
Yeah. That's a constant. I mean, it really is a constant struggle on that. Because I've been trying to promote this idea of accessibility being actually an avenue of creativity, and so you want more of it, but then you run up against, well, I don't want to pay for that, I don't want to do that, I just pay for a little automation, that'll solve everything, right? And it's this totally opposite mentality of what it's there for, and yeah, it's not for your benefit. You're not putting accessibility on the site because it's going to make you richer. And that's a good thing about the community. People talk about how cathartic this is to be able to just talk about. People who are into accessibility want to talk about it. They want to share about it. They want to have stuff out there to help people. They're doing it because it has an effect on other people, not their wallet. So.
Kevin, I just want to say that I can literally go off and talk for the entire day on this topic. So if at some point you want us to leave the stage, you should let us know. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Just wanted to check on that. But the other thing that's interesting about accessibility and open source is that if you've got an issue and you're trying to get a problem fixed for your website, then it's that you need to basically get you need to pay for somebody to go off and give you consulting advice to fix your website. But if it's this problem in Drupal or a problem that is more generally across the internet, there's ways of getting support from people globally that are something that can help you if it's something that helps the community. So by going off and identifying bugs, pushing them upstream, and trying to get a community of people to work on an issue that affects a lot of other websites, you can actually get quite a lot of free advice and support to try and help the community. So that's another sort of angle on this. But also the web is, I don't know if you've noticed this, the web is really complicated. You've got standards that change, you've got browsers that change, you've got content management systems that change, you've got the idea of the interface itself. Back when I started doing web development, having a whole operating system, I'm using a Chromebook. I mean, that's essentially a whole operating system that's built on the web, more or less. It's bizarre how much a web browser can deliver in terms of actual user interface for an operating system. But it's anyways, there's lots of opportunities to contribute back and to engage people with that open source code base. Yeah. So we started this talking a bit about WCAG 2.0 and the shift to 2.1, but I also want to just let people know that this transition from 2.0 to 2.1 isn't the be-all and end-all. That 2.2 is the current recommended release of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And there's efforts to go and to build 3.0, which is a completely revamping of how those guidelines are being implemented. And so there's a huge effort to try and to keep up with the web to be able to mobilize to that. So again, I wanted to just open it up to say, looking at 2.1, 2.2, 3.0, like what are your thoughts in terms of how your agencies and your clients have interacted with the changes of standards around accessibility?
Oh, it's awful. They hate it because it's change.
Yeah.
And they've already invested in tools. They've already invested in Figmas. They've already invested in all of this stuff, and they kind of thought they were done. And so I will say that people are not looking forward to any amount of upkeep on any of issues. And again, as much as I'm excited by saying, look, it'll help you be more creative, I think the practical reality is that it's seen more as a burden for stuff you have already done rather than an additive thing to stuff you have already done. And I'm not quite sure how to fix that.
One bright side from 2.2, I'm like, we're moving to 2.2. They removed one. Silver lining. Yeah, the moving between versions has always been, again, a task. Really just like getting people to buy into doing that. But with 2.2, it's not a whole lot different from 2.1. I think there's like 7 changed criteria. And a lot of it to do with like forms and error prevention, and then a couple small styling things. But yeah, that big one of the removal of the parsing criteria, because our assistive technologies are pretty smart these days and don't really need to rely on that, so we don't need to be throwing errors about it. Yep. That's definitely awesome and has been a good point to move forward with and like use that as my headline of let's do this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we haven't really seen any pushback from our agencies because they can monitor their accessibility compliance with the tools we've given them with their content, but then the things that are on us to address, we kind of got a couple tickets hanging out in the backlog for a while, trying to figure out what's the best approach, like making our sites ready for dark mode and stuff like that, and addressing any of the touch point issues on mobile. So that's kind of the things that we're looking at, but right now our standard is 2.1. So until we are, I guess, forced to move to 2.2, it's on the radar though.
Although 2.2 is what Site Improve is trying to go.
Yes, exactly. Site Improve is trying to move.
And in fact, Site Improve, once you're done the 2.2 AA issues, they start introducing AAA issues into the things that you're supposed to work on. So, but so that's a bit frustrating in terms of people that are trying to meet the criteria. Right. On the other hand, if you've got a leaderboard, it's really quite useful to have that to push people.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
One other thing I'm looking forward to is 3.0, and particularly like the scaling system. So instead of like the pass-fail model, I think there's talks right now of it moving to more of a scale instead of just a black or white, yes or no, pass or fail, a scale of your compliance, which should be super interesting. I'm excited for that.
So yeah, parse errors, which was success criteria 4.1.1, that's no longer an issue because everything's managed by the DOM or the accessibility tree, and so they're not actually parsing errors in the HTML anymore. So that's definitely a good step forward. So what else do I have? A lot of the tools are built to recommend WCAG 2.1 or 2.2, or to try and keep up with best practices of the Web Accessibility Initiative. So that's also another nice framework for this, is just you're able to use the tools you're accessing and not just, if you're building to the latest release, that's something that's helpful. I have been given the 5-minute warning, so I just wanted to go off and just quickly note if everyone just takes like parting thought from the discussion and from the panel, what are the things that stood out, or you like that haven't been said, things you like to raise at this point?
Yeah, this was super great. I think the overall motive is just keep learning, keep going, keep championing accessibility. Something, I'm gonna say a controversial topic, and maybe we can continue this conversation later in the hallway. I am excited to see how AI plays a role in accessibility, especially as they start integrating it into tools and maybe taking over some more of the manual testing process. Obviously not all of it, but very interested to see the future of accessibility from that perspective.
Yeah, I think, definitely back that up. And I think there's going to be a warning issue in that too, because
might have just taken us down a rabbit hole here.
No, I'll tie this back in to the general thing. Like, what we should be doing is adding human elements to the stuff, and that sounds contrary to providing automation and providing AI and stuff like that, but really, if we use that as a tool to assist the humans who are responsible for looking at stuff and figuring stuff and everything like that, it'll work out. We just gotta not think of it as taking away the responsibility, because if you look at the standards as rules you gotta follow, they look very different than if you look at the standards as recommendations for how to get people to understand your content.
And I'll just say, as long as I've been talking about accessibility, I'm glad that the conversation is still happening. DEI has become such a dirty word these days, but I think that if you continue to deploy the principles of accessibility, it's inherently DEI. You're going to do the best for the most amount of people when you just think about accessibility in all aspects of what you do, whether it's your development processes, your hiring processes, just everything. And so accessibility is inherently inclusive and will enable you to level the playing field for the people on your team and the people that you serve. So.
Very good. Two other quick things. One, look ahead to Global Accessibility Awareness Day. It's a great opportunity to learn about accessibility. It's in the third Thursday of May every year, and I forget what that is this year. But if you're not organizing a Global Accessibility Awareness event, there's definitely others you can participate in that are local to wherever you are. The last thing is more self-serving. Civic Actions is holding a city lounge, so we're organizing a party for gov people, civic tech people, everyone in this room, and it's going to be at the I forget where it is, but it's in the events page. It's tomorrow from 5 to 7, so it'll be a great opportunity to relax with other people who want to see government work and want to be able to work to build a government that serve the people. So if you're interested in coming to a Civic Actions party, either reach out to me or see the events page or my profile on LinkedIn, other places. There's lots of places where you can learn about the Civi Lounge, and hope to see you there.
Thank you very much. So before we take a break, want to tell you about what we're doing this afternoon. We're going to, if you've been to Gov Summit before, we're going to do kind of the same thing we did last year, something called Table Talks. And these will be like mini BOFs, birds of a feather. And the way we're going to organize this, we've got 2 easels over here, and I've got 2 markers up here. So the markers are going to go to the easels, make it easier. But what I want you to do is write down topics that you or your agency are concerned about right now. It can be accessibility, because everybody's always concerned about that. It can be anything, contract writing, contractors, whatever. Whatever topics are big on your mind, whatever problems you want to solve, we're going to write them down. And then during lunch, we're going to vote on those topics. So the top 5 are ones that we're going to discuss in the afternoon. And what we'll do is just sit around a table, discuss, and then after 10 minutes or so, we're going to move to the next table and discuss the next topic. We are not going to solve all the world's problems. However, you are, at the end, people are going to come up and talk about what that table had discussed. What we'll do is a short, 2-minute presentation on what your table has talked about, and just so you know that either other people are having the same problem and you just haven't met them yet to talk about it, or you may find new problems that you need to be concerned about. But anyway, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a break until 11. The bad news is they just took the coffee away, but there's water. So stay hydrated, and let me get those markers up there. And just on your way out, just write down anything that's on your mind.